I want to go back to Grenada to teach the Cubans how to fight. They let America take over, complaining about Reagan's might.
The following is part 3 of a 5-part series of a somewhat comprehensive historical account of the events which constituted the collapse of the Grenada March 13th, 1979 to October 19th, 1983 revolution. Please be advised that the following is taken from Chapter 11 of my still-to-be-published account of the history of Grenada, titled, This is My Island. Unison Whiteman, the People's Revolutionary Government's Minister of Foreign Affairs, was on official business in the U.S. and in transit in Barbados while on his way back. On Saturday, October 15th, Frederick, Minister of Fisheries and Agro-Industries, attempted to stir up things a little more with a small crowd through the streets of St. George, asking businesses to close their doors in support of Bishop. He was later arrested by the pro-Cord armed forces. Not only were the people of Grenada confused, but the rest of the region and indeed the world. Never mind the length of time General Hudson Austin took on radio to relate what he hoped may have quelled people's skipping spirits. More sympathy for Maurice Bishop was evoked, and people preferred to accept Bishop as against Cord. The people were eager to take matters into their own hands, and although there were no means of mobilizing the masses other than word of mouth, people's restlessness created assemblies of small groups all over. School children were in the forefront of reaction to the situation. All this time, the government-operated radio station, Radio Free Grenada, was making several announcements relating to no tolerance for anyone who attempts to disturb the peace. That did not deter the people of Grenada, who stood firm and rose up in their numbers on October 19th, 1983. Again, students spearheaded the 9 a.m. mass demonstration up Lucas Street to Mount Welldale, the official residence of the revolutionary leader. In the forefront of the crowd was Unison Whiteman, who had by this time returned to Grenada, although he was advised against it by close friends in Barbados. The chaos of the ensuing period contributed to the spontaneous and steady growth of the crowd of demonstrators. Up to the time of the street march, with chants of, "We want we leader," there was no hint that the demonstrators had planned to bulldoze their way into the heavily fortified residence to release their leader from house arrest. One thing led to another, and although the sentry fired shots over their heads in an effort to frighten them off, they were overpowered, and both Maurice Bishop and Minister of Education Jacqueline Creff were freed. It was quite noticeable that the chant of the demonstrators had changed to, "We get we leader." This must have created some measure of panic on the part of the hard-lined Marxist-Leninists who were in the armed forces. The crowd then led him to Fort Rupert, where he sought refuge and was treated medically by nurses from the General Hospital. Speculation is rife that treachery was involved in the move to bring Bishop to Fort Rupert, now Fort George. The close to 25,000 people on the streets of St. George's that day were divided between the Market Square and Fort Rupert. The arrival of BTR-60 armored personnel carriers loaded with soldiers and dangerous ammunition was met by loud cheers, which were soon muffled by the sound of heavy artillery fire. Shooting ensued, and the thousands of people up on Fort Rupert found themselves scampering for cover. The adrenaline rush was so powerful that people jumped 40-foot walls like they were stepping over a rock in a yard, while others had a greater challenge to scale much higher walls. Critical cases were admitted to the General Hospital, while the unfortunate leapt to their death. Later on that day, Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, Jacqueline Creff, Minister of Education, Unison Whiteman, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Norris Bain, Minister of Housing, Vincent Noel, Vice Minister for National Mobilization, Fitzroy Bain, Trade Unionist, Evelyn Maitland, Mechanic, Keith Haling, Worker, were executed against a wall on which was written, "Towards greater discipline in the People's Revolutionary Army." A full list of those massacred is still unknown. The horrible events of October 19th climaxed with an announcement which was made by General Hudson Austin in a rather shaky voice at around 9:10 p.m. He announced the execution of the Bishop faction of the cabinet and made no mention of the other civilians who lost their lives or were badly injured as a result of the unthinkable act of violence against the people of Grenada. He announced a 24-hour curfew, mispronouncing the word curfew, which at least triggered a bit of laughter in such a trying time by the light-hearted, saying anyone seen outside of their homes will be shot on sight. A 16-man Revolutionary Military Council RMC was formed with General Austin as chairman, was also announced to take charge of the country's affairs. The other members of the RMC were Lieutenant Colonel Liam James, head of intelligence and member of the Central Committee, Ewart Lane, member of the Central Committee, Tan Bartholomew and Ian St. Bernard, both members of the Central Committee, Chris Stroud, Major in the People's Revolutionary Army, Major Keith Roberts, Major Basil Guy Hagan, Captain Lester Redhead, Major Huey Romaine, Ashley Ram Folks, Rudolph Ogilvie, Ayman Abdullah, Raymond Nelson, Kenrick Fraser, and Leon Cornwall. It is believed that the other members of the Central Committee who worked closely with the RMC were Bernard Cord, his wife Phyllis, and Selwyn Strawn. Join us again tomorrow, God willing, for part 4 of a 5-part series of a somewhat comprehensive historical account of the events which constituted the collapse of the Grenada March 13th, 1979 to October 19th, 1983 revolution. Please be advised that the foregoing was taken from Chapter 11 of my still-to-be-published account of the history of Grenada, titled, This is My Island. You're invited to join me as I seek to bring valuable information to you regarding this important part of our pedestrian history.
I want to go back to Grenada.